Thank you, Mr Speaker. It may have taken me a couple of attempts, but yes, I am definitely leaving the WA Parliament, Mr Speaker. And to even say that is, for me, a little surreal, as I am voluntarily leaving a job that I genuinely love. I'll never again have a job as diverse, stimulating or exciting as being a Member of Parliament and Minister. But I also know that while I will miss everything, I don't think I will regret my decision. To adopt a saying from a different scenario, Mr Speaker, it's not you, it's me. I want to begin by acknowledging the sheer privilege it has been to be a member of this place. Colleagues, all of us are so fortunate to be given this rare privilege by our parties and our electorates to be afforded the responsibility to represent them in our state parliament. So I'll start by thanking the people of my community of Victoria Park. They have been good enough to, on 4 occasions, send me to represent them here, the 6th member for Victoria Park. We all love our communities, and in an inner-city area like mine that has undergone incredible change over the last 20 years, it has been wonderful to be a key part of this. I thank the community in which I have lived for over 30 years for giving me this privilege. To the organisation that brought me to the dance and gave me the opportunity to be their standard bearer in Victoria Park, WA Labor, thank you. I came to Labor not from the union movement, but from a family of Labor people. My mother, from the coal mining region of New South Wales, who watched her mother mutter curses whenever the TV screen was filled with the face of either John Howard or Kerry Packer. And my late father, a member of the Stolen Generation and lifelong Aboriginal activist. Of interest, my mother has over the years drifted further to the left, as my father drifted further to the right. This ensured I sat firmly in the centre of Australian politics. To my local Victoria Park WA Labor branch, thank you for your continuous support. The members of our party are just wonderful. They donate their time, their money and effort to ensure that Labor governments are formed. They fundraise, letterbox, door knock and advise, and I'll never be able to return their favour. To the unions, it is fair to say that I have had over the years a somewhat fractious relationship with some of our union movement, but I hope that they have never doubted my belief in their importance. They always keep us focused on working Western Australians. And I want to say the unions have always stood firm and proud at every key point since the 1940s with the Aboriginal rights movement. And while I may have irritated some in my role as Treasurer, we have always, I like to think, found common ground in my role as Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. To my electorate staff, as every MP knows, we are only as good and effective as our electorate officers, particularly when you enter the ministry and time in the electorate is at a premium. The late Rose Sheridan, who worked for Jeff Gallop before me and who, to be honest, taught me how to be an effective local representative, your memory is not lost on us. To Alison Cook. I employed Alison, a young girl, when I was elected, and I have watched her grow into the confident leader she now is. I thank you. Adelaide Kidson, who walked in off the street from Merredin, pretty much, to eventually join me in my ministerial office. Like Alison, you have become a confident leader, and I suspect your journey in politics still has some way to travel. And to Sarah McBride, who gets my incessant texts and demands at all hours of the night, I thank you for your patience and your commitment. Your journey also continues. In respect of my ministerial office, it is always dangerous to start listing individual people. So can I say how wonderful it is to be a minister in WA and to be served by outstanding, committed public servants. While I may now name some, I do not want to diminish the work of so many people who have ensured I haven't completely embarrassed myself during my time as a minister. The Under-Treasurer, Michael Barnes, and the Executive of the Treasury and the public servants at Treasury. Your advice and commitment to the public good serves our state so well. I'm incredibly proud of the work we have done together, and I thank you for your extraordinary efforts, in particular over the past 12 months. If I can also acknowledge Jodie Cant in Finance, Kayleen Gulich at the Treasury Corporation and Kate Alderton in Aboriginal Affairs, you have all been quite outstanding, and I thank you for your huge efforts on behalf of the state. My Chief of Staff, Roger Martin. It's a funny old relationship. the one between a minister and a chief of staff. Sometimes advisor, sometimes wife, sometimes friend, and the person sent forward to tell the minister when his great idea is in fact an expensive dud. You have been fantastic. It's been quite a ride, and I thank you for leaving a small startup to join my office immediately before it became a successful large startup where everyone made significant amounts of money. Thank you. To Robin Taylor, or Riordan, when I first became a minister, my executive officer, and the executive officer to many ministers before me, and I suspect a few to come, I thank you for your loyalty and professional brilliance. The public sector has many rules and regulations. Many of them are not obvious nor make sense. Robin, you ensured I didn't walk an obvious path into scandal, embarrassment and resignation. My advisors, there have been many, and I thank you all so much. You all work so hard to make me a better minister and to ensure the success of the government. Your work and efforts are never taken for granted and will always be remembered. I thank you. The parliamentary staff, our arcane rules are known only by you. I thank you for your support and your advice. There is one group I do want to thank in particular who are invaluable, particularly in my opposition years, and continue to provide support, and that is the parliamentary librarians, Mr Speaker. You are the soothsayers who seem to know the knowledge I seek before I ask the question. My mother is a librarian. I thank you for not following her example in correcting my grammar in my email requests. To the Cabinet, I think we have been a brilliant Cabinet. United, disciplined and clear-eyed in our task, it has been an honour working with you all. Government is wonderful, it really is, but it is opposition, where you earn your stripes in policy development and forge your relationships. You have all been just fantastic. And if I can mention a couple in particular, the Attorney-General.
You woke him up.
He is now. We shared an office for 8.5 years. And despite that, Mr Speaker, we became firm friends. You have been a standout attorney and a loyal, although sometimes eccentric friend. I thank you. To the Minister for Transport, a firm friendship formed in opposition and, dare I say, in the strategic brilliance of the debt monster. It has been a pleasure to watch you in government roll out our signature policy in Metronet. And despite the inevitable tensions, Mr Speaker, between a Treasurer and a big spending minister, you have been a wonderful friend, advisor and colleague. To the Premier, it has been an honour, it really has, serving in your government. Your journey from Leader of the Opposition to a Premier of determination, fairness and humour has been a pleasure to watch and to be a part of. I thank you for your support and the chance to serve in your government. And to my family, I am in a house of females. The only other male is my galah, and we often feel more bonded than you might realise. To my girls, Matilda and Georgina, you have only ever known me as a Member of Parliament, and we can only do this job, and I can only do this job with your support and love. I thank you and apologise for the many late nights and an often grumpy dad. Vivienne, I thank you so much. This has only been possible because you raised my children and fed my galah. To my sister Kate, who, just before I got to my feet, sent me a text to demand that she be acknowledged, I acknowledge you. With your indulgence, Mr Speaker, I will opine on a few issues. The best job in government is Treasurer. I have loved the central agency, the ability to stick your nose into any area. Although I will note now, with a hairy eyeball towards some of you, and a note to whoever may follow in my footsteps as Treasurer. On Budget Day, the Minister for Tourism gets to announce things like cruises, well, used to announce things like cruises and other wonderful things for the tourism sector. The Minister for Transport, new roads, rail. Minister for Education, new schools. The Premier, whatever exciting thing happens to be in the budget. But as Treasurer, I get the wages policy, Mr Speaker, and I thank you all for taking the lollies in our 4 budgets. To a certain extent, we are required to respond to the circumstances we find ourselves in, and then we play them. The repair of the finance has been my task, and I am relieved and proud that we have done so. I was determined to ensure that the Treasurer after me had a balance sheet better able to respond to the challenges our globe presents us. The Cabinet was determined in this, and our success is obvious. One of the reasons we have been able to do this, of course, is our reform of the way our GST is distributed. This has been a massive overdue reform for Western Australia. But I say this to the Parliament, to all members. I wrote this before today. At some point, this battle will have to be taken up again. Other states are envious and hostile, in particular at the bureaucratic level of our success in this reform, and they will continue to advocate into the years of consecutive governments in other states. And at some point, the battle will again be joined. It is upon us all to remain highly alert to this and, in the interests of our citizens, defend this hard-won reform. Can I also thank the Treasurers of other states? I've worked with them all over the last 4 years through the Board of Treasury and KIFA, the Council for Federal Financial Relations, to deal with the issues of national significance. It has been a pleasure working with you all. Mr Speaker, I wish to make some comments on Western Australia's and Australia's relationship with China and what I believe has been the rise of unhelpful public commentary directed towards our most important trading partner. China is by no means a perfect nation, but very few nations are. The Economist magazine's Democracy Index has just 4.5% of the world's population living in 20 fully functioning democracies such as our own. As one of the globe's great trading nations, it's ridiculous to suggest that we should maintain strong relationships with only those countries that share our own values. If you add what The Economist categorises as flawed democracies, it leaves more than half the world's population living in 92 countries without democratic governance. When Gough Whitlam became the first Australian Prime Minister to visit China in 1973, that nation had substantially the same political system that it has today. Every Prime Minister since Whitlam has recognised the importance of nurturing that relationship, establishing a bond between our two nations which has brought enormous benefit to both countries. Australian governments have also been adept at tackling our differences, whether this be in relation to human rights or territorial disputes. We have maintained a frank but respectful relationship. It is only in recent times that some commentators and some of our elected representatives have decided we need to spend less time nurturing this relationship and more time attacking our major trading partner for not sharing our values. Much of the anxiety appears based on Chinese investment in Australia. Indeed, Chinese investment has been growing in Australia and last year totalled $78 billion. But this represents just 2% of the $3.84 trillion in foreign investment in Australia and is dwarfed by the United States at almost 26% and the United Kingdom at almost 18%. Even the Netherlands is a larger investor in Australia, but there is no national conversation about the Dutch buying up our national assets. I am a great supporter of a rules-based trading system, and the global economy has benefited greatly from the principles that were put in place after World War II and refined through a variety of international agreements over the past 70 years. But in the same way I can choose which cafe I will buy my coffee from, Mr Speaker, many of Australia's trading partners make choices about where they buy their barley, wine, meat and other commodities. If my local cafe owner was unfriendly or abusive, Mr Speaker, I'd probably go to the cafe owner down the road. I desperately hope we can take our relationship with China back to what it once was, a respectful one which supports strong trade benefits, but also one in which we can tackle our differences through thoughtful diplomacy. Hundreds of thousands of Australian jobs, many of them here in Western Australia, in all of our electorates, are at stake if we don't manage this relationship properly. I'd like to make a few remarks about my role as Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. I came to this portfolio after having it in opposition for a number of years, and to be honest, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it has become my first love. It is dynamic and frustrating and influenced by the diabolical history of Aboriginal and government relations, but it deals with the most interesting, caring, vulnerable and resilient people in our community, those that have nurtured our country for millennia. I was fully appreciative about how challenging this portfolio is. There is no other area of government, business and public policy like Aboriginal affairs. The ministerial role, this role, is steeped in history. The legacy of violent dispossession, colonisation, labour exploitation, forced removal and institutionalisation of children and so much more lands at the feet and on the desk of the person who takes on the position of Aboriginal Affairs Minister. Make no mistake, the echoes of the role of the old Chief Protector still haunt this position. I wasn't the first Aboriginal person to take this job. Ernie Bridge held the position from 1986 to 1989, but that was at a different time in history. He took on that role in the aftermath of the land rights debate and before the Mabo decision. In 2017, I embraced the job as Minister for Aboriginal Affairs because I have seen the way Aboriginal people, with tens of thousands of years of history and wisdom behind them, are now embraced by non-Aboriginal people. I have seen the potential for agreement making where miners and other land users sit down with Aboriginal people to negotiate agreements that transcend commercial deals. Genuine relationships become enduring and life-changing for all. I have seen tens of thousands of Western Australians seeking a connection with the oldest living culture on the planet through participating in art, theatre, music, tourism and wandering the stunning landscape of our state through an Aboriginal lens. My overriding approach to this portfolio has been to harness this goodwill. Resetting the relationship between First Nation peoples and the Western Australian state is not something that can be achieved in one term of government, but that is what has been achieved since I took on the role in March 2017, with the full support of the Premier and my Cabinet colleagues, is building a framework for structural change in the future, positive change that can't be undone. As I laid out in my NAIDOC address last week, I've been guided in this portfolio by 4 overarching principles: recognition of traditional ownership and cultural connection, addressing past injustices, commitment to partnerships and political bipartisanship. These are principles that it appears all political parties are now committed. Past political divisions that made Aboriginal affairs such a difficult portfolio in WA now appear to be a distant memory, and I'm very heartened by that. One of the first things I did in this portfolio was to welcome the federal court judgment to determine exclusive possession native title rights for the Yindjibarndi people in the West Pilbara, and instructed the government solicitors not to appeal, a decision later vindicated by the High Court. A couple of weeks ago, I visited the Gibson Desert with my colleague, the Honourable Stephen Dawson, Minister for the Environment, to celebrate the recognition of traditional ownership of the renamed Pila Nature Reserve. These 2 recognitions bookend 4 extraordinary years of native title recognition in Western Australia. Native title is a Western Australian story. More than 3/4 of our vast landscape is recognised native title. The native title system is the foundation of Western Australia's relationship with traditional owners. And in this, I want to thank the commitment and unbelievable work ethic of Debbie Fletcher, native title extraordinaire and the engine room of native title agreement making in Western Australia. The native title system is also the key to the proposed Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act. It pains me that I won't see this bill passed into law, as I consider it to be the most important reform of the Aboriginal Affairs portfolio in some time. But I am confident that we have produced a bill that can be introduced into the Parliament next year. I have been enormously pleased with the constructive approach taken by Aboriginal people and the resources industry through all consultation phases, and I'm confident that the effort undertaken to reach broad consensus on these reforms will allow the best possible chance for a bill to be supported by the 41st Parliament. This year has seen extraordinary events that have transformed the position of Aboriginal people in WA. The government's rapid response to the spread of COVID-19 in locking down remote communities in partnership with Aboriginal people, kept Aboriginal people 100% safe in those communities, means that we will look upon these remote communities completely differently. For the past 2 decades, our state's remote communities have had to justify their existence, and yet these are the communities where both the state and the Commonwealth Government said were the safest places to be when the panic over the pandemic took hold. In this, I thank the Aboriginal medical services across Western Australia. You stood up in the most difficult of circumstances. Obviously, the destruction of the Jukan rock shelters early this year has seen, in my view, a seismic shift in the way Aboriginal heritage is viewed. 6 months ago, nobody except the PKKP traditional owners knew of the existence of these caves. Now it seems the whole world knows about them in collective grief over their loss. Jukan reinforces why Western Australia's Aboriginal heritage protection system needs to be overhauled. It also highlights how powerful the Aboriginal position is when it comes to protecting heritage. I sense that this power is not totally appreciated by many Aboriginal people and their supporters, some of whom hang on to the old rhetoric about demanding an enshrined veto over development. It's a power Aboriginal people have already. Sometimes moral authority and public opinion are far more effective than written law. One other comment I want to make about the Aboriginal Affairs portfolio is its combination with lands. And since 2018, I've held the lands portfolio. And it's the first time in Western Australia, in our history, that the portfolios of Aboriginal affairs and lands have been held by the same minister. These portfolios go together perfectly because the long-term development agenda for Aboriginal people is so dependent on land reform. In a state without a dedicated Land Rights Act, we can do so much through working with the Commonwealth Native Title Act and the WA Land Administration Act. I could give numerous examples of where this works. The Yarru in Broome, the Mirrorong Gadgerong in the Ord River Valley, Yamaji in the Midwest, Esperance Noongar in the Southwest, and remote communities. The list is endless. The lands portfolio also gives the minister an opportunity to rename some of the state's landmarks that more appropriately recognise Aboriginal people and their traditional culture. And a few months ago, working with the Nyaranyan and Bunuba traditional owners of the Central Kimberley, the government announced that their wonderful mountain ranges would be forever known as the Winaman Millawundis and no longer named after a Belgian tyrant who never set foot on Western Australian lands. That announcement was met with massive public approval that highlights the goodwill in our state for recognising Aboriginal culture. And can I thank, over the last 4 years, the work, the advice and the support of the WA Aboriginal Advisory Council, who have been spectacular in their support of me as Minister. So colleagues, that's it. I have loved my time here. I love the Parliament, the debate, the camaraderie and the opportunity to serve in government. Only those who have had the rare privilege to serve as a Member of Parliament really knows its delights, its pressures, its challenges and its rewards. I thank you all for the journey we have shared. My caucus colleagues, I wish you all the very best for the upcoming election. To my friends in opposition, I wish you well, but not success. I don't know what comes next, but I'm excited about the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I have to slip out early. Thank you, Mark.
Opposition lines up.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Treasurer.